So, we're going to kick off today doing a little economic experiment, something a little different. You can actually keep your phones out for now. You will be putting them away later. But we're going to do an economic experiment. So experimental economics is kind of a relatively new field in economics where we basically use students as lab rats sometimes to see if our economic theories hold up. All right, so yes, you can keep your phones out, Chris, but you can't be on them doing Facebook and stuff. So just keep them turned over, maybe off to the side. You can keep them handy. All right. So that's what these economic experiments do. And so today we're going to try one of those. We have a kind of a famous case in economics, and we're going to kind of put you guys through that experiment. So let's see, do you want to should we start with the web page kind of explaining it, or go, I'm thinking save that to the end.
Okay.
For the choice. Let's bring up the, all right, so here's the setup here. So you have committed a crime. You've committed a crime with another person, and this person might be a friend of yours, and you've been caught. And so here's the thing. What do the police do when they catch two people that were involved with a crime? What's one of the first things that the cops do? Jake?
They, well, first, they both charge them with the exact same crime.
Do they put them in the same cop car?
No.
No, they separate them, right? So they separate them. Why do they separate them?
Because they don't want each other to come up with some elaborate...
Yeah, kind of work together, basically cooperate on something, right? So here's the thing. You guys have been busted, and it's somebody that you know, because you were partners in crime on this event. And so the police have you stationed in two separate rooms, and they're offering you a deal, right? So sometimes they offer some lighter sentences, right? If you cough up some information, kind of the normal thing. So here's the thing. If you both deny, this is what they're explaining to both of you, but you're in separate rooms. So you're acting on your own. You're in one room. Your other partner in crime is in the next. And so your options are to confess or deny. Confess or deny. And if you both deny doing the crime, it turns out there's not enough evidence to really bust you for the long haul. They're looking for a confession, right? And so if you both deny, you go to jail for 3 years each. So you're going to go to jail for 3 years. But then you get an offer that if you confess and your partner denies, so if you confess to the crime but your partner denies, then you're going to be freed immediately. Maybe some probation, but you're going to be scot-free, no jail time. And your partner's going to go downtown for 10 years. So they get 10 years in the slammer. You're off scot-free. If you both confess, then you're both going to do jail time of 8 years. So does everybody got the idea there? So you're going to be either a red person or a green person up here. And this is where we'll be using our phones. We'll get to that step in a moment. But both of you are in separate rooms, and you're going to tell the police that you're either going to confess or you're going to deny. And then your payoff here is the 3 years. If you deny and your partner denies, you both have just 3 years because there's really not enough evidence. Of course, you don't know that they don't have enough evidence, right? It's just kind of one of those things like, do they really think they can prove us or not? Well, if we just deny, I think we'll be in good shape. So 3 years each if you both deny. If you deny but your partner confesses, then they get the 0. They're scot-free, and you're doing 10 years in the slammer. If you confess and your other partner denies, you go scot-free, they do 10 years. And then if you both confess, you both do 8 years. Does anybody have any questions on the setup? Okay, go to the QR code. So if you guys could pull out your phones and do this QR code, it's going to bring something up on your phone so that you guys can make a choice. And it's going to tell you whether you are a green person or a red person. But it doesn't matter. The options are the same for both. So once you get the QR code, hurry up, get your phone out, you can jump in on this. Once you get the QR code and you get it on your phone, you'll see the two options.
Says you logged in.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
You'll see that you're either a red person or a green person, and then you'll be given the option to confess or deny. And so the big question is, what would you do if you were in those circumstances? You're sitting at the police station in a cold office with cinder block walls, and your other partner you can't talk to, you guys just got cuffed and stuffed and brought to the place. What are you going to do? Confess or deny? So go ahead and make your selections. Confess or deny? Looks like we got one green. Oh, we got one green left. Who's the green guy? Still thinking out the best thing to do. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now we're going to see what you guys chose.
Let's say on your phone what you guys got.
So yeah, you guys should see on your phone your results. So it looks like we've got 33% denying. Interesting. Look at the confess, Nate.
Yeah.
So that is just,
Wow.
I wonder what the 16% would be then. Was that one person?
I was hoping I had.
What did we have? We had 14 people, right?
Yeah.
So 7 14ths. What is 16? Is that how it works? Let me do 16.7.
That's another 1/3. 16 to 16 is 33.
Times 14 equals 2. Yeah, okay. I don't know if there's some rounding or how that works. So, all right, so now let's go ahead and I'm going to put the lights up. So we talked yesterday about Nash Equilibrium and dominant strategy. And so it looks like we got results kind of all over the board, but a lot of people were doing the denying and confessing. So let's see, we had one person confess, so they put 10 years in the slammer here. What is the Nash Equilibrium? Look back in your notes now. What was the definition of a Nash Equilibrium from yesterday? Nash Equilibrium.
Choice accommodation such that neither agent wants to change their choice, taken as the given other choice.
Okay, so neither agent wants to change their answer, taking as given what the other one's done. So let's go check out the most popular two answers here. It was a tie. On both of you denying that it was good, would either person like to change their answer, taking as given what the other one? So what that means is that the green person, we're going to take as given that they're denying. Would red like to change their answer? Would red like to change their answer? Yes. Why?
Because of the confessing is 0 years.
Right, because it's 0 jail time versus 3 years. So taking as given that green is going to deny, red would rather confess. So that's not a Nash equilibrium. So now that we're down here at this one, is this one a Nash equilibrium? Well, would red like to switch? No, we just kind of did that one, right? 0 is better than -3. Would green like to switch, taking as given that red is confessing? Would green like to switch? Yes, because 10 years versus 8 years. I'd rather have 8 years. So this is not a Nash equilibrium. So is this a Nash equilibrium? We already said green wouldn't want to switch. Would red want to switch? No, because 8 years in the slammer is better than 10 years in the slammer. So this is your Nash equilibrium. But what's interesting is we didn't get it with you guys really playing this game, right? And that's why we do experimental economics. We predict that we would have both people confessing, would be the prediction of the model with the Nash equilibrium. But when we have real world people do it, we will often get results that are counter to it. Not all the time, but sometimes. So I'm curious what you guys did here with your choices. We had most of you over here. What was going through your mind on whether you'd really confess or deny under these circumstances? Just have some discussion on here. What was going through your mind with your choice? Yeah?
I figured they were going to deny.
Okay, you were thinking they were going to deny. So what did you do, by the way? Did you confess or deny?
I confessed.
You confessed. Okay, so did all of you have some friend or family member in mind that you did this crime with, or you did? All right, so you were, look, I'm sorry, give me your name again. Will, that was going to be, I should have guessed it first, but all right. So Will doesn't mind sending his buddy down the tubes or whoever you were thinking of. And so you didn't have any, being confident that your buddy, is this a friend or a brother or a friend? Being confident that your friend was going to deny, you apparently didn't express any feelings back to them that, hey, if we're going to do this, we're going to go down together, we're always a team.
Yeah.
And that's what's fun. And it's a classroom experiment, right? So it's a lot different if you're actually cuffed and stuffed sitting in a cold cinder block room, perhaps, right? Different pressures, different things. So that's another thing that happens with experiments, that we're not always able to really create the same level of incentives and everything. So other comments on whether you knew the person, not. Did you feel obligated, some of you, to do one thing or the other, either for yourself or for your fellow person? Like maybe you were the one saying, I'm going to deny no matter what, and if that means if I go to jail for 10 years, I don't care. Did anybody feel that way? Okay, so give me something. What else? Why'd you pick what you did? Yeah, Emily.
I denied because I figured 3 over 10, so I figured they would deny too.
Okay, so in denying, you were looking at 3 versus 10, but you kind of had more faith. You were kind of mentally trying to weigh in that they would probably deny too.
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking?
Not equal.
Okay, good.
I didn't know if I probably confessed.
You probably would have confessed,
Yeah.
given the circumstances. Okay, and you came in late, so you didn't hear the full pitch. Okay. Anybody else? All right, so we who did this one, by the way? And that's what is unfortunate with the way this game is. We can't see who did that, but how many people confessed? Just show of hands. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's why we had 4. So you guys were probably the both of you, I guess, matched up with that probably. Yeah. So all right, cool. What about the dominant strategy? Is there a dominant strategy here? A dominant strategy was a choice that made you better off no matter what the other person picked. So if green denies, what should red do? Confess or deny? If green denies, what should red do? Confess. If green confesses, what should red do? Confess. So both players have a dominant strategy of confessing. And so this is the classic game I presented to you yesterday with Coke and Pepsi, except the payoffs are different, right? This is the prisoner's dilemma. The dilemma is my partner in crime really going to deny also, because this is the better outcome for both relative to the 8 years in the slammer. Do real world police officers actually do this? Do sometimes people serve time for crimes they didn't commit? Yes, you've seen all the TV shows, right? And there's been a lot of people lately with forensic evidence and new technology with DNA stuff that, people get pressured into, hey, if this goes to court, you might be facing 20 years in prison, or you can just serve 5 years or 10 years, right? You get some sort of lighter sentence for confessing. And so this is a pretty standard tactic that's used and can sometimes not always get the results. The intent is that you're actually going to be confessing to a crime you really did do. But it's possible that the sentence structure is such that it's better for you to confess even to a crime you didn't do. So I used this on some students back about 15 years ago at Iowa State University. I was teaching a large lecture hall of about 250 students. And I had teaching assistants, kind of like Nate here, although he's my graduate assistant, but I had multiple teaching assistants, and my teaching assistant from Germany had kind of that German accent. He said, Russ, I got something for you. So what he did is he was eyeballing, part of their job was to eyeball for cheaters. And what he saw was this guy was cheating on this girl's paper quite a bit. So she came and turned it in, and then he turned his in like 20 minutes later, but he very discreetly grabbed her paper when she did and put it to the bottom, and then 20 minutes later he turned his in and he kept them both. We looked at them side by side, and it turned out that it was almost word for word, and like, you know how when you get something wrong and you have the same person put the same stupid answer down? It's like, that's pretty good evidence. But did I know for sure that they cheated? Is it possible that they used similar language to answer a question, right? So the evidence is a little sketchy, right? So I'm like, perfect. I'm going to use some of this economic theory that I've been teaching for years. So I waited. This was a final exam, by the way, which you guys will have next week, a week from today. I waited till the end of finals, and so Friday afternoon, I gave a call to the guy. And I said, listen, I've suspected some cheating going on, and I appreciate honesty, so if you just admit that you did it, I'm just going to give you a 0 on this test and not fail you for the whole course, because he already was like an A student, or like A, low A student. And he said I didn't do it, and I'm like, oh yeah, classic. And so then I reiterated, I mean, I'm looking for honesty, and if you just admit what you did, then this is, you might drop a letter grade, for missing this test, but it's not going to kill your O grade. He's like, I'm not going to confess to something I didn't do. I didn't do it. And I was like, all right, click. So then I call her up. And I didn't know, by the way, if this was boyfriend, girlfriend, right? I didn't know if they knew each other. I didn't know if they were complete strangers. So I pick up the phone and I call her and I say, hey, I noticed there's been some cheating going on, or I suspect some cheating, and I really appreciate honesty. And so gave her the lowdown, and she said I didn't do it. And I'm like, well, listen, this is pretty serious. I mean, both of you are going to get an F. I'm going to report it to the dean. I mean, you very well might get kicked out of college. And then she's like, and he didn't even know. I didn't know him. I cheated off of him. It's not his fault. Don't take him down. And I'm like, yes, I broke her. Right? So I got the confession that I wanted. And so now I go back to my prisoner's dilemma, and what I presented is what you guys just went through. And I said, if you confess and the other person denies, I'm going to let you off easier and appreciate your honesty. And the other guy is going down the tubes and getting an F for the course, who was currently getting an A. And she claimed when she was through tears that she didn't know him. He didn't know she was cheating off of him. And I'm like, it's the way the cookie crumbles. So that's my prisoner's dilemma story. He went down the tubes and she maintained an A. Thank you, Chris. I know other people were thinking it, but that's what I was waiting for. Chris said that's kind of messed up. So, okay, I always like to let it hang out there to see if you guys think I'm the ruthless economist that I sometimes am. But no, I ended up not penalizing him at all. The purpose of using the prisoner's dilemma was to get it, so I'm trying to show you kind of difference between economic theory and then real life. It induced the confession I was looking for, right? And I just had to believe that he was telling the truth, no, I didn't do it, and she was telling the truth, no, he didn't know that I was doing it. And I felt like I got the truth out of the situation, and then I think justice was served. So, all right, so that's kind of fun with experimental economics. All right, any questions or comments? Nate, yeah, you can pack that up. All right, well, we're going to continue on. We actually moved on to the resource chapter, as you might remember. And if you can pull out a piece of paper, we're going to have some points today for watching some videos. We've got one here that we'll start off with. So all I want you to do is kind of make one comment and one question. One comment, and so basically the comment would be a note. Like take something that you thought was a minimum of one. You could take down a couple things, but a couple things you thought were interesting, and then maybe a question that you generated from it. So here is the video, Does Capitalism Exploit Workers? In other words, there's been a history of, does the free market system that I've been saying is a good thing, does it actually take advantage of workers? Is it set up for just the owners of the company to benefit? All right, so here we go.
That a capitalist economy promotes the systematic exploitation of workers. For Marx, this idea was based on a labor theory of value, which most scholars today reject. Nevertheless, many still agree with Marx's basic claim that capitalism is inherently exploitative. They simply define exploitation in broader and less contentious terms. Instead of thinking about exploitation as involving the forced extraction of surplus value from labor, contemporary philosophers define it as taking unfair advantage of others' vulnerability. And defined in this way, many philosophers think that contemporary capitalism is rife with exploitation, with economically powerful capitalists taking unfair advantage of workers' vulnerability in order to maximize their profit. So, what should we make of this argument? Is capitalism exploitative? And what's the alternative? Well, first, it's absolutely correct that many capitalists want to exploit workers. They want to pay as low a wage as possible and get as much work out of workers as possible in order to maximize profit. But the fact that other capitalists also want to exploit workers in this way makes it difficult for any of them to do so. This is because competitive pressure forces capitalists to pay workers close to the value of what those workers produce, whether they want to or not. If you try to pay someone less than their worth, someone else will offer them more because they can profit by doing so. Imagine you're in an auction, bidding against others for $1. Of course, you'd like to pay as little as possible for that $1. But if someone else was bidding 60 cents for it, wouldn't it be worth your while to bid 62? And wouldn't someone else then bid 64, and so on? In a competitive marketplace, that same process leads capitalists to pay workers close to the value of what they produce, not because they want to, but because they have to. The second point to keep in mind about capitalism and exploitation is this. Even when exploitative or unfair exchanges do take place, the institutions of a free market ensure that they will at least usually be mutually beneficial, because the exchanges are voluntary. As an example, think about an exchange that a lot of people find unfair: payday loans. A poor working man needs money right now to meet his basic needs, and so gets a loan from a payday loan store, but only by paying fees equivalent to a 400% annual percentage rate. That's grand, at least for the sake of argument, that charging such a high interest rate is unfair. Even so, it's important to bear in mind that both parties had the opportunity to say no to the exchange if they believed that they could do better somewhere else. And because of this fact, because the exchange was voluntary in just this very weak sense, this means that both parties expect to gain more from the exchange than they give up. It means that unless one of them has made a mistake, the exchange will be mutually beneficial. This is an important fact, important for the well-being of individual laborers, and important for the growth and development of society as a whole. Mutually beneficial exchanges are how wealth is created in society. And the more wealth a society creates over time, the less vulnerability there is for capitalists to exploit. Markets aren't perfect. But whether or not you think capitalism is exploitative, you need to ask, what's the alternative? The usual suggestion is political regulation and control. But if our concern is to minimize exploitation, we need to ask whether this alternative really makes sense. After all, citizens are in a position of tremendous vulnerability relative to the state, and lobbyists, bureaucrats, and elected officials will often be tempted to exploit that vulnerability for their own private gain. Think of the way in which our political institutions subsidize large agribusinesses, bail out auto companies, cartelize the banking industry through the Federal Reserve System, and so on. All of these policies benefit the interests of the economically powerful and politically well-connected at the expense of ordinary citizens. That's not a free market world. That's big government. And politics is unlike markets, in that political exchanges aren't voluntary. When the government wants to use your money to bail out GM, you don't have the right to say no. And this means there's no guarantee that the exchange will be mutually beneficial. When politics is involved, one party's gain usually comes at someone else's expense. Politicians gain from the contributions they receive from big business, and big business gains from the favors they receive from government. Sure, those favors have a cost, but because government has the power of coercion, it can force third parties to pay that cost. Those who can afford political influence get the benefits, and those who cannot afford it suffer the consequences. This is how politics works. And it's not because we have bad people in office and need to get nicer people in. It's because of the structural nature of politics. Because the state has the power to impose its decisions by force on the public. Just hoping that the state will use its power on behalf of the vulnerable isn't enough. We need to ask ourselves, if we really want to reduce the amount of exploitation in the world, is increasing the power of the state really the best way to do it?
Okay, give you a chance to come up with a question there.
How do you feel about this?
Okay. What did you find interesting about the video? Kind of the note part. So I asked you guys to write down just one, at least one thing from the video that you thought was interesting, or maybe something you learned. I got a volunteer on something that you thought was interesting. Yeah, Colton.
I already said it, when politics is involved, it's a one-sided game.
Okay, when politics are involved, it's a one-sided game. So what did that mean to you? What do you think? Who gets hurt or something from that?
The citizens get hurt by that.
What's that?
Like the state gets the gain, the citizens don't.
Okay, so if we start thinking about the government being real people that are self-interested in something or have an interest in something, then it kind of changes the picture of the government there to protect the worker. How is the worker protected in a market environment? What keeps the profit maximizing business from keeping wages too low? What was the thing in the video there? I'll go to Evan.
Competition.
Competition. So competition in what way? I think there's multiple avenues of that way. What part of the competition were you thinking about?
Other businesses wanting to do the same things.
Okay, so businesses need people to do what they want to do, right? And so if one employer is paying $8 an hour and the other business needs some workers, how can they get that worker to voluntarily quit and come working for there? I'm going to go to the back.
Pay more.
Pay more, right? And so that's the competitive forces there, that it's not really the employers trying to keep down. The employers know that in order to maximize profits, they need good workers, right? And so to keep people working, if other employers also need good workers, we've created a competitive environment that's going to drive wages up to induce more people to come to work. So that level of competition's there. Okay, good. So do we need the state to come in and put a minimum wage? Well, not if there's healthy competition is the argument, right? So right now, what's our minimum wage, federal minimum wage? $7.25. What can you go get a job for up on Ottawa fast food joints down at the south side of town? What do you think? What do you expect to make if you go out and try to get a job? $10, at least $10, right? So most of the places. So right now, the competitive environment is at a wage that's higher than what the government had set as a federal minimum, right? So competition is winning in a sense that we already have wages above that. And so other labor restrictions can come in too. So there's, if you want to be a stylist and do hair braiding, there's even eyebrow braiding. And there's ways to put eyelashes on, and so you want to get into some specialty thing. You have to have a cosmetology license to do some of that. Well, how much does that cost? Is that just like 50 bucks or something to get a cosmetology license? Does anybody know how many hours you got to put in to go to cosmetology school?
Isn't it like 92?
It's more than 92, I think. 92 hours, is that what you're thinking? It's more than that, I believe.
I think it's like over 100 hours. I think it's like 120 hours.
I think it's like 1,600 hours of schooling total if you take the courses that you got to take, the amount of time that you have to do with working on, you know, within the beauty school and getting the certificate, and then you have money on top of that. So what's happened is, and what's funny about cosmetology is that it's usually small businesses that are doing that, right? Salon, if you think of salons and stuff, it's small business. But what's happened over time is the small businesses have been able to lobby the government to say, oh, there's somebody braiding hair at Ottawa University in the dorm room. Go arrest her. Why? Because she's operating without a license and she's taking away my business on Main Street. I went through the 1,600 hours that you made me do to get my stylist license, right? To get my cosmetology license. And I want to be protected from that. What is that starting to sound like, that if you have a person who wants to braid hair and charge whatever, 50 bucks, I think it can be a lot more depending on the level of braiding, but to charge 50 bucks, so we have some competition of a college student who's trying to turn a buck for college braiding hair out of their dorm room. What does that sound like if you have to have a license in order to do that business? What's our thing with characteristic number 3 of monopoly and oligopoly? A barrier to entry, right? So we have these types of barriers that get erected by government, and a lot of times it's big government and big business, although in the case of cosmetology it could be a group of small businesses perhaps that are lobbying to keep other businesses, to keep competition out. And so occupational licenses is a classic way that there can be barriers to entry. And so the point with all that gets mixed up a lot is that big government and big business playing kissy face with each other, that is not capitalism. But yet people think it is. They think it's not what you do, it's who you know, right? Do you know the mayor of the town and the city council members, if we're talking about the city of Ottawa? Do you know your state legislator up in Topeka, right? Can you get them to pass some things that work to your favor? It's not what you do, it's who you know. That's not capitalism. The idea of capitalism is to keep competition alive and well, which means low to no barriers to entry, right? At least not artificial barriers. Okay, so that's kind of the moral story, and then what we're learning in this resource chapter is that if we have healthy competition, then people are, the competitive forces are going to allow people to earn what they're worth in terms of how much they contribute to the bottom line for the business, which is kind of where we left off yesterday, thinking about the marginal revenue product. So when should a person, or when should a company hire a person if they're a profit maximizer? What was that statement we did yesterday? What should the business do? When should they hire another person? Jalen? Or Kaylin, sorry.
Is it looking at like their marginal cost and demand curve?
Marginal cost and demand curve. So talk about the demand curve part. So we had a little more detail. We kind of wrote out that paragraph. What was the rest of that? Will, you want to take Sam?
Well, we were talking about like the printer. The printer takes like less money. Like if people who are working, it takes less money for the printer to be working and just leave it. But if the printer starts making more, then how much you pay the people.
Okay, so it was the revenue generated by the printer. So now put that in the context of an employee. When should I hire another worker? When would it be profitable to hire another worker? Put that concept towards hiring the employee. When the employee will generate revenue that's greater than the cost of that employee. That's a profitable thing to do. I'm going to hire somebody if you help my company generate at least as much revenue as I'm going to pay you. If I'm paying you $10 an hour, you better be generating at least $10 of an hour for me, right? So that's really where the demand curve comes in. All right, so we're going to do a little table to help motivate that today. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns by each other here. So this is the demand schedule. So the labor demand schedule. So we got our schedule goggles on. So one way that we often look at math. So we got the number of workers again. So this is the number of employees, so worker. And we are doing some data entry. So these are like data entry workers. How many data entry workers should I have? So let's go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll go down to 5. And then I'm going to look at the output. So the number of statements that they're doing. So Q here is the number of statements that each of my data entry people create on a given day. 0 workers means I got 0 statements. 1 worker can generate 5 statements. 2 workers, 9. 3 workers, 12. 4 workers, 14. And 5 workers, 15.5. So let's pause there for a second. What is this schedule showing? I'm hiring more people. This is the output that they produce, the number of statements. What is that schedule of numbers reflecting at this point? What law? What law? So these people are generating, these data entry workers are generating statements. That's what my company does. I'm like an accounting firm or something, or a sales company. Evan?
Law of diminishing marginal product.
Good, the law of diminishing marginal product. All right, so what do we mean by that? Well, look at what's happening to the numbers as they go down. What's happening to the additional product made by an additional worker? It's getting less and less, right? So our next column then is the marginal product, the marginal product of labor. So the first person added 5, going from 0 to 5. The second worker added 4. The third worker went from 9 to 12, so they added 3 statements. The fourth worker added 2 statements, and the last worker hired, the fifth, was 1.5. Okay, so what do I do with these statements? Well, it's my business. I have people that are buying these statements from me. So the sales price of the statements, is how I generate revenue, right? And so each statement is worth $200. So with 5 statements going, I've got, and this is sales price of statements per statement. Maybe let's just put sales price per unit, which is a statement, or per statement, is at all levels it's 200. My sale price is going to be 200, 200, 200. That's the price of my product. 200, 200. Okay, so what's the next column going to be? What's the next column going to be? Are you starting to piece together? We're trying to think about how helpful each additional person is. How much revenue are they generating for me? Total revenue, right. So I want total revenue next, which is equal to price times quantity, just like we've been doing all terms so far. And so what's my first level here? Well, this one I can do. If we have 0 people, we get 0 statements, and we still have a price of 200, but we're not making any money on it, right? So 200 times 0. And what's the next level? How much revenue was generated by the first person hired? $1,000, right? $1,000 is what the first person brought in for my company. 200 per statement times the 5 statements that he or she produced. All right, what is the revenue generated, or the total revenue by the next level, the next hire? What's my revenue now, total revenue? 1,800. So I got 200 statements times 9 statements. And then what do we got here? Next one? 2,400. And then I've got 14 times 2. How much is that? 2,800. And then finally, we got 15 and a half. 3,100. So this is the money in the cash register at different levels of production, different quantities. But now this allows us to unpack what the marginal revenue product is. The marginal revenue product is equal to the marginal revenue times the marginal product. That's the formula that we gave. But we can do it a little bit differently with the way we built this column, because we kind of made the formula as we went, right? So the total revenue here, we can think about the incremental revenue. We could take marginal revenue times marginal product. So the marginal product of the first worker was 5 units times the marginal revenue, which was the price. So 5 times 2 is 1,000. But what is the marginal revenue product of the second person? What did the second person generate for me? 800. So now there's a couple ways to look at it. The second person generated 4 statements, right? So 4 statements times 200 gives me 800. Or, now that we built this column up, it's really the second person moved me from $1,000 of revenue to $1,800 of revenue, which gave me $800 more, right? So the second person generated $800 worth of revenue. Now, is that second person, is the first person more skilled than the second person? No, not under what we're doing here. So that's why when I first introduced this topic a little bit, we talked about the number of Russes, and Russes were equally skilled. So why is it starting to fall? Why do we have the law of diminishing marginal product, essentially? Why does an equally skilled person continue to be able to produce less and less? We're running out of space. Good, right? So the law of diminishing marginal product came about because we're running out of some other resource. We're adding labor, but we're not necessarily adding office space. And so the workers are starting to get crammed together maybe as we do more. Maybe there's congestion at the copy machine, since I brought up the copy machine yesterday, right? So as I generate more statements with one copy machine, and these people need to generate the statements, but then they need to make 5 copies of it or whatever, then there's congestion at the copy machine. So that causes this law of diminishing marginal product. It's not picking on the productivity of any one worker. In other words, the fourth worker, if the fourth worker was actually the first worker, if we switch spots, we'd still have the same numbers. They're all equally skilled. It's the congestion that's causing the problem. All right, so then we just keep doing this. So now the third worker gave me incrementally $600 worth of revenue. The fourth worker gave me $400 worth of revenue. And finally, the fifth worker gave me $300 of revenue. Okay, good. So let's graph out the marginal revenue product column. So put on your graphing goggles, give yourself a a decent size graph here. And now what you're going to be measuring is the number of workers, which is our labor, right? And we're going to be measuring the dollars up here that each worker's generating. So we're going to go up to 5. So just kind of equally space 5 out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So do something like that. The first worker brought in how much money for my company? $1,000. So for the first worker, go up and pick somewhere on your scale here $1,000. So that was the marginal revenue product of the first worker. The second worker was 800. So we go up to 800. Probably should have actually graphed that out a little nicer. Hopefully it won't get too screwed up. We only got a few more to go. And then just keep mapping that out. 600. The 4 was 400. And the fifth was 300. So you should have these dots. Mine's not drawn to scale very good here. I'll just do one of those little things. Should have brought that up. I should have matched those off. Maybe you guys did. I should have did that like I did here, just to make it look a little nicer. So if you're a profit maximizing company, what's the most that you'd ever be willing to pay the third worker? What's the most that you'd be willing to pay the third worker? 600. So why do you say that?
That's the most you can make, probably.
Yeah, that's how much we're going to make. That third worker is going to generate $600 worth of revenue. I'm a profit maximizer, so I'd be dumb if I paid them more than 600. Now, would I like to pay them less than 600?
Yes.
Sure, right? So now the third worker, the marginal revenue product of the third worker is 600, reflects the maximum willingness to pay. How much would I pay for the fourth worker? 400. So this line now, which has a little kink in it, if you guys drew it to scale, that's okay. It kind of gets a little flatter right here at the 400 to 300 because it's only dropping down 100. That thing shows, so this is the MRP curve, and it shows the maximum willingness to pay for each worker in the order in which we're hiring them. Shows the maximum willingness to pay. So the key point is the most a profit maximizing firm would pay the third worker is, the third worker was 600 bucks. But notice it's the maximum amount. The most that they would pay would be 600. Well, if this thing's just showing the willingness to pay for hours of work, what is it? What is the marginal revenue product curve? It shows the price, the highest price a company is willing to pay for extra people. What does that sound like? What do we call something like that? A curve or a relationship between the highest price people are willing and able to pay for various units of something. What does that sound like? The demand curve, yeah. So the marginal revenue product curve is the demand curve. The demand for labor is derived from the revenue that each person brings the company. So we started off yesterday with acknowledging that the demand curve is a derived demand curve, and this is why. The amount that we're going to be willing and able to pay employees is driven by the revenue that's generated. Okay, so any questions or comments there? All right, so let's do example, I guess we're gonna call this example part 2, I'm adding on. So if the firm can hire as many data entry workers as it wants to at $400 per worker, what is the profit maximizing quantity of labor to hire? What is the profit maximizing quantity of workers to hire? So we can hire as many data entry people as we want at $400. $400 per shift, I guess, whatever that shakes out. Maybe it's a 8-hour shift. So if it's an 8-hour shift and it's $400, what are they making? $50 an hour? How many are they going to hire? 4. So 4 at 4, why? Because 400 was their last person hired. And so why would we stop at 3? So if we stop at 2, how much could the second person be hired for? $400. What about the first person? $400. What about the third person? $400. The fourth person, $400. The fifth person, $400. I can hire as many workers as I want to at $400. If that's the case, then that is the marginal cost of a worker. So would I stop at 2? Why would I want to hire the third worker? Dawson, what is your fingers rubbing together? What is the third worker? So here I am at 2 workers. Why would I want to hire another one? Brings in more money. The revenue generated by the third worker is $600. How much is the third worker going to cost me? $400. How much money am I making on the third worker? $200, right? So I'm continuing to make money as a profit maximizing firm by continuing to hire more people until I get to the fourth worker. With the fourth worker, the revenue generated by the fourth worker was equal to the cost of the last worker, so you're breaking even, but what's true in economics that's always built into the cost? What's always built into the cost? We had costs that were super important. Is it okay to earn $0 in economics class? Yes. So I'm looking for the answer of why. Why is it okay to earn $0 when you use economic profits? We got opportunity cost. Bingo, Evan, right? So opportunity cost is what's included. What does that mean? It means the accounting cost is all there. So I'm going to be paying that person X amount of dollars with a paycheck. That's the monetary accounting cost. But we're also taking into account any implicit costs, right? The costs that are kind of hidden that we talked about before. And so I'm always earning a normal profit, even when my economic profit on the fourth person hired is 0, I'm still earning a normal profit. So it's totally fine to hire the fourth person, right? I'm still earning a normal profit on the fourth person. Now, would I want to hire the fifth? No, because the fifth person brings in $300 to my company, and I'd have to pay $400 to get them. That's a bad move, right? So this is one way to think about the marginal cost of each employee to optimize profits. All right, so let's make sure we answer this question for your notes, because you'll see something like this on the final exam potentially. By the way, I wanted to note the final exam a week from today is going to be all through the material this week. We will have new material next week, but I'm not going to put that on the final. You're going to still have your mind tap work with it, but it won't be content that I'll put on the final exam. Everybody get that?
Will the mind tap still be on Friday?
Mind tap will still be, actually I'm going to keep it the Sunday. So you'll still have the weekend to do the mind tap stuff. That way you don't have to worry about getting it done by Friday or something like that.
Are you having another study?
We are going to have another study thing, yes. So let's go ahead and write that down. Let me answer this question. Don't let me forget that one. And then we'll come back to your questions. But let's make sure your notes are good up to this point. So how many will they do? Hire, the answer here is to hire labor equal to 4. So L star is 4. 4 maximizes profits, where the MRP, the marginal revenue product, equals the marginal cost. Okay, now back to JC. So the review session, I asked JC to change the time, and I can't remember what it is. I think it is 7:30. So hopefully you guys can be done with practice, but I will talk to your coach personally. All right, I'm serious about this. You guys are student athletes. The coaches know that they should let you off if you're not doing weights or something else, or if they have something else. I will personally talk to your coach if you feel any tension about skipping something to do with your athletics versus coming to this review session. You should come to this review session. So JC, the review session will be Tuesday night at 7:30 in our room.
Is that the only time?
That is the only time.
Oh, I have class.
You got class? Oh, okay. Well, that stinks. We'll try to have something going. Well, I guess you can't really do it. What time's your class? Just curious.
7 to 9:30.
Oh, so it's right during the whole class. Okay. Well, unfortunately, that's the way the cookie crumbles. I apologize for that. I'm happy to, you can talk to JC separately. So JC is our tutor for the class. So if you fall into Colton's boat, the test isn't until Friday, so you could possibly hook up with JC on Wednesday or Thursday, work the exam yourself and go through it, and maybe some other people that you know in class will have come to the review session, and then you can set up a separate time with JC. So that's true for any of you guys. Yeah, it'll be in here. Awesome. What? Yes, we still have the video project too. So the video project is you guys picking a topic of your choice. Oh, of course, this thing then. I guess we might as well do some of the cleanup stuff so you guys know. I can't believe I never thought about this before. Oh, yes! Golf club is just magic. There's so many things. Okay, so Dawson asked about the video project. So this is on your syllabus. Right in the middle has the video project. So students will demonstrate their understanding of an economic concept discussed in the class through the creation of a visual representation of the concept. You can go solo or create groups of no more than 3 students. Then each group will perform the following tasks: selecting an economic concept or idea in which the group is interested, create a video clip, and demonstrate, explain the concept or idea. 2 to 4 minutes, so minimum of 2, maximum of 4. And this just gives you information about uploading it to Blackboard. So even if you do it as a group project, all 3 of you will individually upload the video that you did jointly to your Blackboard shell. All right, so we might be able to show some in class, or I might be able to post them on my RustyCon Rocks group. Need to have it uploaded. Be creative and have fun. The students who get A's on this make me laugh, and it's enjoyable. So kind of a straight, like, let's say what I just did here on the board. I mean, you're gonna pass, but it's not quite as fun if you don't do something that's a little, so bring economics to life. There's lots of different stuff. There's lots of examples on YouTube. I don't care if you somewhat, do a variation of something that somebody else did. I mean, there's lots of stuff out there. We've talked about so much stuff with corruption and political, maybe one of you is a senator that's taking a bribe on the side to give some action to your private company. So somebody's big business, somebody's big government, and then you play kissy face with each other. I'm not saying you have to kiss each other, but I think that would be kind of a fun area to do. There's 1,000 things you guys can do. So I really mean this as the most important thing. Be creative and have fun with it. I've seen a lot of great videos over time. Jake?
How come we can't watch the videos like others? I think
we can. I mean, I usually don't post them all, but I'll post some of them and get them on my RustyCon Rocks video, which has some of the student clips on there.
There's examples.
So if you go to my RustyCon Rocks site, I have some of them up there. So, okay. Anything else?
So do we have certain topics?
Anything's wide open. Everything we've done in the class is a topic, is a potential topic. So, anything else? And again, you can do it by yourself, or you can have another little requirement is that if you do it in teams, at least one person has to be on the video at some point doing something, right? So they can't just be the camera person or something. So everybody needs to be involved in the clip. But you're free to use other people, like some friends that are on your floor or something. You can bring them into the video. So it doesn't have to be only people in our class in the video. You can bring in outside people for the video too. I think I showed you guys the one with the McDonald's, right?
No. Wait, it went to McDonald's too?
Yeah. All right, let me, I think I have this one right here. Well, I thought it did. Okay, I don't have that one, but let me show you Luke's from a million years ago. Now here's Sammy's. I thought I had, I don't even remember what Sammy did. This is from 2015. I've been doing this a long time. All right, recommended settings, fine, finish.
Fair tax. Is there such thing as a fair tax? The new fair tax plan, there's a lot of things going on, which comes from a decrease in income taxes and actually complete obliteration of income taxes. Has a great thing. This fair tax plan.
This was a different type of thing. This was from Macro with fair tax, so that's not a good one to show you. Although this one is fair tax. Where is my one with? All right, I'll just show you my RustyCon Rocks. I think. Wait a second. I know I had. There we go. There we go. I think I got it in here. Huh. All right. All right. So RustyCon Rocks is my YouTube channel. And here's my playlist, and I think I've got one called Videos somewhere. Student Video Projects.
Hello mates, Safari Man Canes here. Welcome to the Jordan Man and Canes Safari Quest. Today we're going to look at some of the amazing beasts of the American economy. Hop aboard the aggregate demand train and we'll be off. Looky here, we've got some incredible creatures in their natural habitat. The animal spirits have appeared to lower this one's consumer confidence, and this one appears to be causing sticky wages. This is just not a good show, but no worry, I have an idea to liven them up. We'll throw low interest rates and government spitting at them. That should liven them right up. Now that's how an economic ecosystem should really work. Safari Man Canes, you've done it again! I'm Safari Man Frederick Hayek. Don't let Safari Man Canes run you astray. This is not how things should work. You've worked these poor creatures into an artificial frenzy with your low interest rates and your irresponsible government spending. Do you want to cause a stampede on the bank? This inflated energy is not going to last. Oh look! A bank run! And now they're more tired and more depressed than they were before. The boom that was created only led to another bust.
As you can see, there's two opposing opinions in this case. Keynes believes that boosting aggregate demand is key, while Hayek believes that this artificial boost...
Alright, you get the picture here. This is actually more of a macro one.
This battle continues on.
Alright, so that was a good one. And there's a lot of good ones that I don't have posted up here too, but there's some other ones that you guys can look at for the student projects. Alright, let's see. So let's see, we got to wrap up, a couple last things to wrap up today. But, so you got the video project, and we've got the final exam review covered, so. So the last thing to look at is just the combination of supply and demand, which we really started off with. So now we've unpacked that the demand curve is simply businesses trying to maximize profit, right? And it's a derived demand. So demand and supply. So by looking at labor, and here we're measuring wages, and let's just put a downward sloping demand curve, which is the marginal revenue product curve. And a supply, which is the workers. The interaction of the two gives us a wage. So in Ottawa here, let's say it seems to be about $10.50. You can get a job and there'll be X amount of workers working here. L equals 100. So how do workers get more pay? How does the wage climb? What can change to make wages grow? If more people move to Ottawa, will that cause wages to go up or down? Down, right? So the supply would increase and go down. So that wouldn't help us. Now, if some people leave Ottawa, that actually helps wages, right? In terms of the population of households that are here. But how wages usually get some upward movement, because population growth tends to be pretty stable, by the way, right? So, so that usually isn't a big problem, is we want to think about the demand shifters. I don't think I gave these to you already, did I? Or if I did, I think it's probably worth reviewing now that we got it. So the demand shifters. So one would be an increase in demand for the final product. So if people want the product that you're making, that's going to increase the price of the product, right? So if we're making hamburgers and we come up with a new meatless hamburger or something, whatever story we want to tell, if there's an increase in demand, then that causes the price to go up. If the price of the product goes up, now you see how that channels in, right? If the price of the data sheets that we were doing today, if they go from 200 to 250, all of a sudden new people want our product and we need to hire more people. The fifth worker might become profitable now, right? If the price of the product goes up. So if there's an increase in demand for the final product, that can cause the demand curve to shift to the right. So if the price of the final product goes up, then this might shift to the right. And that causes wages to continue to climb, maybe to $12, moving from point A to point B. Number two would be if our workforce becomes more productive. So maybe there's a new machine or something that increases the productivity of our data entry workers. So an increase in the marginal product of labor. An increase in the marginal product of labor. So this could be a new machine that makes each worker more productive. You guys probably, for the most part, don't even know what an old typewriter is. I'm sure you've seen it, but you don't really get the full feel of it unless you've typed those keys and see the old way that reports used to have to be done. Well, was there executive assistants and secretaries who lost their job when the computer was invented? Yes. But did secretaries and executive assistants get paid more, those who used the computer? Yes, right? And so some of those other people got maybe retrained and did something else, but that would cause the demand for labor because each person is more productive now that we're thinking through our elements with productivity. So anything that changes that can do it as well. Okay, that looks like a good place to wrap for today. So we're right at about time. So we got our demand shifters. That brings us through chapter 25, and then we'll start off next week. We actually continue on with some labor next week.